So everybody has a bunch of garbage hand here, and it's going to get folded around to the blinds. And the guy in seat 4, Aaron, he's a 510 regular here on Live at the Bike. He does not chop. And he chooses to raise it up here to 25 with Queen 10 offsuit, which I think is a fine play. This guy here, Ron A, has been playing ridiculously tight. Like, he's only played 1 or 2 hands in 2 hours. Above average, no problem with this raise by Aaron. That's fine. So the pot's going to be about $45 after the rake. And Aaron flops, obviously a pretty good hand here for Queen 10. He's got an open-ended straight draw. There are 2 diamonds out there. And you can see here that Ron A has flopped top pair. The pot's 45, and Aaron comes out and he bets 50. He bets pot. And you will see this play a lot. Ron A makes it 100. This play is really, really common, and I don't really understand the logic behind it. It's not just blind versus blind, but a lot of times, if you raise with a hand pre-flop and a guy calls you and you're out of position and you bet the flop, let's say you bet 75 in a 5-10 game, or say you bet 30 in a 5-5 game. If they make it in a 5-10 game 175, or if you bet 30 and they make it 75, it's almost always indicative on a wet board like this of a top pairish type of hand. So when Aaron bets 50 and this guy makes it 100, I would almost guarantee you, even if I didn't see the cards and I was at the table, that this guy has a jack. And the difference in this scenario versus a raise in the field and this guy calling is that, he might not raise, or he's not going to have like jack 4 suited in his range like he might have in the blind here. But this is really indicative of a top pairish type of queen jack, king jack, ace jack, jack 10 type of raise. And Aaron here with the open end and straight draw, he really has a number of options here. He can call and try to hit his straight, which would be an 8 or a king. And, the reason for doing that would be, I think a lot of times, is that if I would really bet with a queen and make it look like I missed diamonds, I would use an 8, a king as my outs. I would bluff diamonds here if I'm just going to call, and I would take this guy to value town with the queen, and just as long as he doesn't have queen jack, I would be good. So there's that merit in just calling, as Aaron does here. He just calls. There's also a merit in bet 3-betting this flop. If you think that a guy will release a hand like jack 6, can you bet 3-bet this flop? I actually like Aaron's play here because I use a live theorem that nobody ever raise folds in live poker. Now that's not always true, but in a blind versus blind scenario, I would rather call than try to bet 3-bet and barrel a guy off here, because I think there's less of a chance that he's going to fold in this particular situation, in these particular dynamics. So I'm actually fine with Aaron calling, and now the pot is 200. Turn card here is an ace. Now that's an interesting card, because if the guy has a jack and Aaron leads, I don't necessarily think that he is going to fold. But watch what happens here. And this is really when it comes down to paying attention to sizing. And this is the years of experience, what they do for me. He bets a weak $100. There is just no way that a guy that has flopped the set here, or has flopped, who has ace jack, is going to bet $100. I'm talking about a recreational player on such a wet board. Recreational players want to protect their hands. This is so key. It's not about value. They don't want a bad beat. They don't want to be sucked out. Which means that if Ron A had 9-5 of diamonds, or 9-5 of spades here on the flop, I guarantee you that when Aaron bet 50, he would have raised much more than 100 and would have followed up with a turn bet that was much more than what this is, which is just 100. This $100 bet represents exactly what I think that Ron A has, which is a weak jack. And in this particular case, if Aaron had recognized the sizing and recognized the pattern of this type of sizing in live players, I think this turn is an easy check raise. It's an easy, easy check raise. There's just no way that a very tight player is going to continue on with a weak jack here, even in this blind versus blind scenario. Now, with that being said, Aaron decides to call again. Like I said before, I would definitely bluff diamonds if I'm just check calling here. But watch the sizing. This is really, really key. When a guy makes a small raise at you on the flop and you decide just to call, if he follows up with a half pot size bet or less on the turn, when the board remains wet and scary, he does not have a strong hand. And a lot of times you can go for a check raise semi bluff on the turn where you will gain more fold equity than if you were to bet 3-bet the flop, because of the fact that it's just another card. It's harder for a guy to call now that there are 4 cards out there and he has a single pair. In this case here, it's an overcard. Now he doesn't beat the nut flush draw. So think about that line. Here, like I said, Aaron just calls. Now the river is a 9, which really changes nothing. And at this point, the way that Aaron played it, I would definitely probably give up. I wouldn't try to bluff this card. I'll actually give you an alternative line here. Let's say, for example, Aaron had bet out with ace-4 of diamonds here on the flop here. He raised it in the small bet. The guy min raised, and Aaron decided not to bet 3-bet the flop. He's got ace-4 of diamonds. Turn card is an ace. A lot of times I'm going to lead the turn because I don't expect a weak jack necessarily to bet all the time on the turn. But if John had bet the turn, like he did here with a jack 10, I actually don't want to blow him off of a hand like a weak jack. I am actually going to check call the turn and bet any river and make it look like I have busted diamonds. So if I had ace-4 diamonds here, I would bet the river, and I guarantee you I would get called. That's the beauty of flush draw boards. You can bet very, very thinly because, as I've said in many videos and many podcasts, people will look you up lightly on the river because of the polarized nature of most recreational players' river betting patterns, which is usually a bluff or the nuts. There isn't much of a tendency to bet in between. If you can add that in between betting, then you will increase your win rate a ton. And if I had ace-4 diamonds, I would check call this turn, and I would absolutely lead this river, and I guarantee that jack 10 would call. Instead, jack 10, of course, checks behind, and Aaron does not win a hand that he really could have picked up here on the turn. You'll see this time and again, which is why I think it's rare that you will really see any bad 5-10 no limit games. Or below, even though this is 10 1/4, but it's kind of playing like a 5-10 in terms of the level of play. Because even if you are in a game that's tight, guys that are tight, that doesn't mean that they're good. A lot of guys are just tight bad, where they don't play many hands pre-flop. It doesn't take a whole lot of skill to fold, but when they do get a hand, it's tough for them to release. And normally, that's a situation where they have an overpair and you flop 2-pair plus. I mean, you're always looking to get involved, I think, with tight guys when you can get some sort of implied odds. Now, this hand is even worse than that. Going to get into a spot here where Ty actually has, he's got pocket queens. So he's going to bump it up. I believe it was to 200 on top, attacking the straddle here, Azuke straddle on the button is actually we'll call it 275, and Azuke has called here with 6-7. Both guys are playing pretty deep, at least 5,000 effective. So the pot's going to be about $600 here, and you can see here Ty's got queens. Now this is a classic spot when I'm up against a guy who I don't feel is very sophisticated. If I'm in Ty's spot here, I think that I'm checking this a lot of the time. if I'm up against a better player, I think sometimes you're forced to see bet just to protect your range a little bit. But I think people overdo the whole balancing type of thing in live poker. You don't have to balance a whole lot. You can actually play exploitable because no one's actually going to exploit you. So in this case here, especially in this particular against this particular player, I'm actually checking to get a couple streets of value later on. Because if I come out and bet this board, it's tough for me to get called by worse. In this case, though, this guy is such a station. You could actually bet with queens and probably get a call by a 6 or some sort of straight draw. So it kind of flips it the opposite way around, where it's not even that bad because you definitely can get called by worse if you bet with queens. But against more straight up players, I think sometimes I like to check, and then against really sophisticated players, I like to kind of merge. But anyways, the pot is 550, and Ty, he decides to make a 300, which again, I don't think it's terrible because I think you can get called by worse, and he does. He gets snap called by worse. He gets snap called by 6-7. So we're dealing with a $1,200 pot now, and you can see that Azuke has now turned trips. So now you don't beat an ace, and you also don't beat a 6. So you get into a spot where he checks, and Azuke comes out and bets pretty much close to pot. He has come out and he has bet 1,050. And it absolutely amazes me because you can see Ty beat him into the pot. And for some reason, tight players or just any players sometimes go crazy against bad players. They don't recognize that sometimes a player that's a recreational player, that's a weak player, might actually sometimes have a hand. I mean, Ty bet 300 on the flop and got snap called, and the pot is 1,200, and now this guy pots. He pots the turn. And I'm saying that this is either an ace or a 6 almost always. The only thing that you can bet here is 7-8. And part of the reason why I bring this hand up is that it just doesn't make any sense. I mean, if Ty thinks about the hand, it's such an easy fold. But he's just a player that's so tight, he just can't fold his hand. He just can't fold his hand. It's 1,050 on the turn. The river is inconsequential. It's a 3, which brings in 7-4 if the guy was ever really betting, 7-4. And the pot is about 2,400 or 2,500 now. And you're going to see here that Ty is going to check. And now Azuke bets about 1,000. Or we'll call it 1,200. So it's 3,600, 1,200 for Ty to call. He's getting 3-1, so he needs to be good 1 out of 4 times. But what hands can you beat here? The only thing that's getting turned into a bluff is 7-8. Now the problem is that sometimes you can actually level yourself into thinking, well, this guy would never bet this big with just an ace. But a lot of times he's going to end up with monsters, slow-played monsters, a hand like pocket 5s. A lot of times he's not going to necessarily slow play like 6-5 or something like that, but he could have ace 6, or in this case, it makes perfect sense that he, in fact, has a 6. Again, I'm looking at it from the outside, and sometimes people can kind of get that type of fog. I've had it before. Sometimes it's just difficult for you to think. But if you're a tight player, you got to realize when you're going to release your hand. I mean, part of the beauty of playing against weaker players is that unless you're playing against quote-unquote like laggy, loose players who are really aggressive that have a lot of money, and you will come and cross those types of players, but usually at the lower levels, they tend to be stationary, and they tend to be loose passive, which is the exact player that you want to play against. When a guy is putting this much heat on the board, he has an absolute monster. The only draw here that misses is 7-8. And if he was to float you, he's giving up on the river. I just don't think he's betting that amount. And this is just, on the surface, such an easy fold. And I really don't know, what Ty was thinking here. I don't know what he thought that he was beating. It just goes to show you, again, and actually the bet itself is 1350. I thought it was, it's 1350. I thought it was 1200. This is just a perfect example of why to play live no limit. Even though the guy can't beat anything, he's a tight player, and he's playing one hand an hour, and he just doesn't want to fold. It doesn't matter what's out there. which is the reason why you can call with suited connectors and pocket pairs and set mine and implied odds types of hands. The guys, they just won't fold. There is nothing that this guy can beat. And in the end here, as he continues to tank and tank and tank, he makes an unbelievable call. An unbelievably bad call, but an unbelievable call. And Azuke wins a pretty hefty pot here with 6-7 against pocket queens. So the pot's like 1900. The river is obviously a very, very interesting card. The board double pairs. So it is now 10, 10, 6, 6, 4. And obviously, Mike's hand is counterfeit. I'm going to roll this back a little bit because let's take a look at Mike's face. Now, Brian is not looking at Mike. The whole reason why you wear sunglasses is so that they can't see you looking at them. But we can actually tell, unless Brian's looking out of the corner of his eye, that he's not really looking at Mike. Because let's take a look at Mike's expression here when he sees the 10. Check. And you can see here, the eyes raised, that is not a fake type of disgruntledness. I mean, I think I'm not an expert on live tells, but that is a genuine kind of micro expression where he does not really like that river. In this next spot, it's kind of an interesting situation. Couple things going on here. We're going to be looking at this guy, seat number 7. That's Matt. He's kind of on a short stack, and he basically ends up turning the stone cold nuts against a guy with a draw that bluffs the river. And this is a lesson in hand reading why you would not want to bluff the river in this particular case. And it's also a little bit of a lesson in when you might want to slow play and when you might not want to slow play. Now, Matt here is under the gun, and we're playing 5-10, and he's got about an $800 stack, so he's not super deep. And he opens to 50 under the gun with aces. And as you'll see here, he's going to get the entire world to call him. 5 people are going to call him. 50 and then 5 people. So the pot is going to be $300 here. We've got Jeff Madsen here in seat 1 calling with a suited connector, which looks like it could be a small pre-flop mistake because he's only playing about 700 or 800 deep. And I'm not sure if he's going to get the fold equity if he does flop a draw. We've got this guy Rich calling with 4-5, Israeli Ron in the big blind calling with Queen 9, Adam calling with 3-4 suited. And we're going to see this board 5 ways with aces. And Matt's got about $750 left, and he flops top set here. And you can see that really the only person that can give him good action is Israeli Ron, who's in the big blind right here, who's flopped an open-ended straight draw with a flush draw. Now, Matt has come out and he's bet 200 into 300, which is a fine play. I'm going to keep going here. 200 into 300, so the pot's 500, 200 to call. And Aaron postures a little bit with Queen Jack. And for the reasons that Aaron folds here, remember how strong this looks when you're trying to determine what especially a pre-flop raiser's hand is. This guy has bet into 4 people on this board. So my contention here is that he really must have an ace. He must have an ace. I don't think he's betting pocket kings or pocket queens. And the only other flush draw that he could have would be like, because Israeli Ron has Queen 9, would be like King 8. I guess you could make a case where, he has a hand like 7-8 of hearts or some sort of suited connector. But to be honest with you, that's not really a good bet on this flop anyways, because you're not going to really get through the whole field. So when he's betting 200, he has at least an ace. And we're going to, let's keep that in mind. Now, for Israeli Ron, when this guy bets 200 into a pot of 300, if he has ace king or ace queen, if Ron checks ships, he's got about 750 left. If Ron has any fold equity, I'm talking about 10, 20% fold equity, it's a good ship. Ron's got a 15 out draw, and I think it's a good spot for him to ship. I think a lot of people overplay their hands in the sense that they will get it in with 12 out draws, 9 out draws, 10 out draws when there really isn't fold equity and it's a really bad spot. But a lot of times you can't really go wrong playing a 15 out draw aggressively just as long as you think that the other guy doesn't have a draw. And unless he has king jack of hearts specifically, Ron's going to have decent equity against any hand. Now, I know Ron, he's a recreational player, tends to play his draws a little bit passively, so it didn't surprise me here that he ends up just putting in the call of 200, and now the pot is 700. And now this is really where it gets kind of interesting, because Matt has about, we'll call it maybe 550 or 600 left. He's got one pot size bet left here as we go to the turn. And, you know, you're sitting there with aces and you're like, well, the guy must have a draw. Now, here we can see that the ace of clubs rolls off, so he's got the absolute nuts here. He's got the stone cold nuts with pocket aces. And if you are playing deeper, you know, always comes a question whether you should check back the stone cold nuts or not. I'm always a pretty big proponent of betting here. Now, the cases for checking back is that you know the guy doesn't have an ace, so you know that he must have some sort of draw. So if you think he's going to bluff the river, you can sometimes check it back. The case here, particular with Matt, is that he can check back the turn and still get all his money in on the river because he's got one pot size bet left. When you're thinking about slow playing, you have to make up for the value on the river. Again, this is kind of a unique case. If I had deeper stacks and I had jacks full or tens full, I would never, ever check back the turn. And I probably, with deeper stacks, wouldn't even check back the turn with pocket aces. For the sheer reason, as we roll this ahead, because it does go check, check here, that your bet here as an inconsequential four of clubs comes out, which brings a backdoor club draw, and we see Ron go out to bet. The reason why I wouldn't check it back on the turn, and the reason why Ron's bet on the river here, I think, is pretty bad, is because of the flop play. When you're doing and you're trying to figure out hand reading, you have to play the entire hand back in your head. He made it 50 under the gun. He bet this flop into four people. And we talked about, like I said, the flop analysis where he must have an ace. He is not checking back ace-king or ace-queen, which means on the turn here, he really must be full because he's never betting kings or queens on the flop, and he is not taking a stab at it, I don't think, with anything else. Like I said, you can invent maybe low hearts, but that's so unlikely. It's much more likely, I'm talking about 95% of the time, that he has an absolute monster here, which is tens full, jacks full, ace jack, in this case, quad aces, which is part of the reason why if you're in Ron's spot here with the queen nine of hearts and you've played this hand passively, this is not a spot that you would want to bluff the river. It is all hand reading because of his flop bet. It's not necessarily the turn check, but it really is the flop bet. The flop bet means he's got a monster on this checkster. And again, even if Matt's not even a thinking player, it's just the way that it is when you're betting into four people. It really is a truth serum type of board. And bluffing the river here, I just think is suicide because you're almost always betting into the nuts. Now, right now the pot's 700 and Ron goes out and he puts a $300 bet out there. And you know, one of the other small interesting parts of this hand is that, you know, Matt tanks for a while and tanks for a while, and he's got about, I guess he's got about 650 left. 650 left, and he looks at Ron and and he starts talking. And one of the other things in live poker is no one ever, ever, ever bluff raises the river. So I mean, it could even be a spot where, say, Ron had, for example, made a really light call with King 10 of clubs, and he bet the river here when he ran into a backdoor flush. When Matt raises the river, Ron is absolutely never good. And Matt makes a min raise here to 600. And I think that you can easily fold the king high flush here to the min raise. There's just absolutely no way that you're going to be good. Now, there is one other thing to be said about this hand. It's tough to see here, but Matt has actually left himself about $75 behind, which really is a small mistake, because you can see it. It's about 75. Either Ron has a busted heart draw, or he's run in to backdoor clubs. So he's either going to fold or call. The amount of money that you raise is basically irrelevant. By him raising 300 versus him raising 375 makes no difference. Again, it's a big pot, and we're talking about small money, but there is absolutely no reason for him to not move all in. And you see kind of the same thing even if he had more money behind. The min raise really doesn't make that much of a difference in proportion to the pot. Now, if you've got a lot of money behind and you shove, sometimes guys can level themselves into thinking, well, I have a flush, I have to call. But really the point of this hand is the fact that when you miss draws, you have to be able to evaluate what rivers to bluff against preflop raisers that check back the turn. And if you play this hand entirely back in your head because of the fact that Matt bet the flop into 4 people, he has to have a monster here when he checks back the turn.